Do you guys want to know what it's like to start a professional sports league? Well, then you have to listen to this episode with Michael Rabil. Michael started the Premier Lacrosse League, which is basically just like the MLB, NBA, NFL, but for lacrosse. It's a really interesting conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, we're live. Michael Rabil.
Let's do it.
What's up, man?
What's up?
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm here at the HQ.
Yeah, you helped us find it.
Yeah, that was a fun process.
You did some great work.
Thank you. Everyone, I did not pay him to say that.
You did not. You just did good work. You grinded with me.
Yeah. And I mean, we didn't really know each other prior to that transaction. We got introed by Sean Kelly.
Yeah.
You had a broker at the time, and you kind of told me what you needed, and we just got to work.
Yeah. You were hustling the hardest. We like to look for deals in our real estate assets or leases. I guess they could be assets. But you were willing to play in sort of the price range we wanted and be really aggressive like I wanted to be, and not all brokers are like that, and so I like that about you, and you found stuff based on my criteria that it just didn't seem like it was a normal CoStar pull, right? It was just like, here's some stuff I'm seeing, here's make me make some calls. We toured for a while, man.
Yeah, we did.
Were touring for like
it was fun.
4 months.
We were touring for a little while.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I noticed early on is I could tell you had experience in real estate.
Yeah.
Which, as I got to know you, I realized that there was a time in your life where you actually worked in my industry.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was you were very responsive. And usually when someone's really responsive, it means there's like an eagerness or hunger to like kind of get something done.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, this guy doesn't mess around. Like, he is for real. Like, he wants to make moves. And so yeah, it was a fun kind of 6 months.
Yeah.
Kind of being on that journey with you. And here we are
Crazy.
at the HQ.
Yeah.
In Los Angeles, Southern California.
Yeah.
How is it being here? Like, cause when I think about Premier Lacrosse League, I think of it more as like an East Coast sport, right? And like, you made the decision to come to the West Coast. Was that a hard decision for you?
It was a conscious decision. It was a hard proposition because of the thoughts around the brand of lacrosse being mostly East Coast. But we looked at data, particularly on the youth participation side, and saw that California youth participation in lacrosse was skyrocketing. Participation over the last 10 years in Southern California is up like 220%. So we were like, okay, there's interest here. We also knew that to do things differently, it's not like this is the first time pro lacrosse has been tried. We had to be in an ecosystem that would allow us to, access media in a different way. I think rubbing elbows or shoulders, however you want to call it, with folks in Hollywood can sometimes unlock media opportunities. And so, I mean, that's how our documentary essentially really got made and eventually acquired by ESPN Films. And
I loved that documentary.
It's
so good. The story of you and your brother. I mean, gosh.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Fate of the Sport.
Fate of a Sport.
Yeah.
It's on Hulu. It's on ESPN Plus. And it's a story of building a sports league, and it's a story of an athlete, my brother Paul, who's co-founder with me, playing and trying to build a league. And so like the dichotomy of that. And then we wouldn't have gotten it produced if we weren't in LA. Paul, we've been filming since the inception, so call it 7 years now at this point. And we had all this film, we were trying to piece it together, and really good director and Michael Doniger, and but we really needed some more firepower and storytelling, and what to capture and how to wrap the thing and package it, and music and lighting and color and all these things that we weren't. And so we ended up bumping into a guy named Matt Tolmack, who used to be president of Sony Pictures, and he has his own production company now. And he was at a Harlem lacrosse event that Paul was at, and sort of they were able to build a relationship, and then he jumped in the picture with us and helped co-direct it and co-produce it. And then we got some other folks from the industry in LA to jump on, and it just helped. It helped to expedite it. So it was good, man. And so that type of thing, being in LA allowed us to just be in the right places. And, there's passion and interest around entrepreneurship and lacrosse that allowed us to build a movie.
Yeah. Growing up, the amount of my friends that played lacrosse was pretty eye-opening. Like, I remember so many of my friends that played football and baseball. It seemed like they would go into lacrosse. A few of them played in high school and then went on to play college on the East Coast, but nothing really came of it after. I think looking back on myself, I mean, I'm a baseball player. I was always kind of known for my speed. If I could do it all over again, I might lean into lacrosse. I'm not even kidding you, because I love the sport. And the more I got to know you, the more I got to kind of know your story, got to see the documentary. I was like, I remember calling my dad after. I'm like, I think we dropped the ball here. I think
you did all right, man.
I think there could have been an opportunity if had we gone a different direction.
Played it. You played at USC.
Yeah, I played
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was a cool opportunity. So let's start from the beginning. Let's kind of get to you being 40 under 40, which, by the way, congratulations. I just saw that.
Thanks.
40 under 40.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
I look 90 after doing this.
You don't,
yeah.
You don't look 90 at all. So walk me through kind of the early days. Like, I'd love to kind of hear kind of how we got to this point that we are now. And I'm going to ask you a ton of questions like throughout the process.
Sure.
The journey.
Early days of the PLL or early days of just the career?
Yeah, like kind of what you were doing. I mean, we kind of talked about it. You were doing real estate deals early on.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that, real estate, my career arc is still in the arc phase, hopefully. But it started in corporate America, which I think is a good place for folks to start, because you get this level of like corporate hygiene and, I was wearing a suit every day to work.
Where were you in
I was in
Washington?
I was in Jones Lang LaSalle.
Yeah, JLL. And that was right out of Dartmouth.
That was out of school. Yeah, I was at Dartmouth. And you're wearing a suit every day, and you're, I was in their corporate real estate division, did a little bit of brokerage to start. So I knew your industry, and I was just able to, really work with, Fortune 100 companies and service their real estate needs. And wear a suit and tie every day, and you need to be there, and you're in the service business too. And being in the service business, I think a lot of that transfers to what we do at the PLL. We have corporate sponsors, and that's being in a service business, and the etiquette and white glove mentality you need to have, because there are a lot of other brokerage firms, there are a lot of other sports leagues that your partners or your clients can place their time or resources or money, and you have to provide value all the time. Reinvent yourself, and to be malleable. And so I think I learned a lot of that, white glove service in that industry, and again, corporate hygiene and how to present and how to be quantitative, and how to think, a few years out, not just like how do we solve the immediate terms, how do we think. I remember I did this big proposal for Lockheed Martin. This is a tangent, but I presented this proposal for Lockheed Martin that was like, let's talk about all your leases that are in like the DMV, and they had a ton. And I was like, why don't we just do like a big preemptive lease renewal? And so I went through and grabbed all their leases, and I was like, we can consolidate. And I had this big presentation, and I was like 24 years old. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I went through the effort of grabbing their leases and trying to like aggregate them, and using all these different fragmented lease expiration dates, trying to tie the ones together that were coterminous, and then using that to aggregate, put them all in one location, and then use that to get leverage with either one landlord, and then also or go back and do preemptive lease renewals to just capture. This is a down market. This is 2010, right? This is the back of the mortgage crisis. I was like, let's take advantage of this soft market. And it was like, they entertained me for a little bit, but
it's smart.
The point was like, I was able to go through that exercise, present in front of, Lockheed Martin's property group, and those reps, I think built, not only, self-confidence, but, a lot of value sets that we apply today. And started in real estate. And then I was like, quickly after 5 quick years, was like, I want to go out on my own.
Yeah.
And started simple, started with, partnering up with some of my buddies from college, and we started opening up gyms. I want
to get into that, but taking a step back,
yeah.
When did you make the decision that you wanted to go into real estate? Was it college? Like what drew you to commercial real estate brokerage?
I think it was, you look, and so we grew up, we grew up in Montgomery Village, Maryland, and, working class neighborhood, and, was fortunate enough to go to Dartmouth and play football there, and sort of, I thought I wanted to, be in the FBI or CIA or something, because those were the people I know who had the biggest houses in our neighborhood, right? And so, then you go to Dartmouth, and all of a sudden you have people who decided when they were sophomores in high school they wanted to be doctors or lawyers, investment bankers, and this whole world opens up to you. And so it's a great experience for me. And I think that you look for mentorship, and you don't know where you're really going to fit. You just try to get the best GPA you can and get a couple internships. That space is like still really broken and is going to be continued to disrupted by AI. Like early stages of careers, I actually worry about as a sector and as like as a category of the job market because of AI. But it's still the same. It's like you try to find internship. I mean, so many people are always asking for internships at the PLL just to get some work experience. And then so I got an internship in real estate. I had an internship on the Senate that my mom helped me get because she knew someone, and I was like moving boxes in Barbara Mikulski's office. And then went and got an internship and finagled my way into like a developer's office, and thought it was interesting, and I liked real estate enough at the time. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is what I know. Let me go try to get a job. Yeah. And then I had some help along the way. People introduced me to people they knew, and a lot of
athletes usually do really well in brokerage.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was good. I learned about a whole asset class that's, obviously an arm of Wall Street, and again, took a lot of learnings from that to apply today. But
you're in it for 5 years. You realize, hey, I don't think this is for me long term.
I didn't see the upside. I started thinking, the longer you work, you just start being like, okay, where's my upside? Like if I'm putting all this effort, I want like ownership, and I want, and also, to be honest with you, I have a hard time probably taking orders from people I don't fully respect. And there was some of the, my boss who I worked with, I had a lot of respect for, but other people I was just like, I can't do this. Yeah. Like I can't work for them. And so I was like, no one else is going to hire me, so I go do it on my own. So that was a lot of the thought process. So you talk to other entrepreneurs, probably like me, who are just go out there and do stuff and don't have some crazy idea. A lot of it's just, they have a hard time suffering the corporate ladder. And so I just decided to go out on my own and work with some friends and build gyms. And it sounds pretty simple, but our thought process was really, we were franchisees. It was going and looking for towns of 10,000 to 12,000 people, which are really small towns, and seeing if you could build a 24/7, low cost, month to month, brand new gym in their markets. And, the mission was to, by building these gyms, improve the lives of those people in those towns, because they didn't have that type of resource available to them at that cost and with that nice of equipment.
How are you guys underwriting that?
Sort of money. I lived at home when I was working at JLL, lived at home. I always kind of knew that I was going to go start something. So I saved up a bunch of money at the time and wrote my entire bank account check, because we couldn't get lending money, which leads me to the next business. Wrote my all of my savings as a check. I remember walking into the Bank of America in downtown Baltimore. I was like, all right, here it goes. This is the first gym. It was in Joppa, Maryland. It's a town of 13,000 people. And I was like, here we go, right? And that's just this kind of like a lot of operators, entrepreneurs have those stories, right? And I was like, well, what's the worst case scenario? Like I used to always tell myself, I go sell shoes at Nordstrom. Always, I can go sell shoes at Nordstrom. That'll be worst case. I can sell shoes, and I'll go do that if it doesn't work out, right? And my parents will let me live at home, and it's all good. So that's how I got my mind around it. And then, one thing turns to another, and we create cash flow and use that, and you start raising more capital. And ultimately, we couldn't find debt financing, and because again, it was back of the mortgage crisis, banks were slow.
This is 2010.
This is 2000. Yes, 2010.
2010. And you, coming from real estate,
2011,
JLL, you understood how to underwrite the deals on the real estate side.
Yeah.
Which, if you're smart on the real estate side, it helps you from a cash flow standpoint that first year.
Totally. I understood real estate. We got really aggressive with our leases.
So you needed debt for more like the equipment.
I didn't want to keep using cash flow because cash flow was paying our salaries. We had to keep using cash flow to open new gyms, and we ended up getting up to, I think, 9 gyms in total. But about halfway through, I think we had submitted loans for 100 or so different banks. This was like, sounds insanely archaic, but we were like faxing loans. I was paying loan application fees. Like I had to pay $25 to $75, depending on the bank, write them a check, mail it to them just so they would review my application. And so the same guys who were starting the gym with, I was just like, this is insane. Like we should start our own bank and it should just be online. And then that's sort of snowballed, and my buddies were at Stanford Business School, and they found a couple of investors, and I was on the founding team, and we basically put together this concept where it's just like lending to franchise owners, just like we were. So it's like, how do we find a group of people like us to lend to that are trying to do the same thing at really friendly rates? Because you only had banks who were really slow, they had the best rates, or you had predatory lending, and there was nothing in the middle or even closer to where banks were lending. So we're doing term loans, like 3-year loans at 9 to 13%, but the alternative was 5 to 8 or 40 to 100%.
So you're doing this while you're running those, I think you said
the gyms. We had the gyms. We're still building those properties, and then we started the startup.
Which is on the banking side.
The banking side. It was a fintech company, and so we had that. I moved to New York. I don't think I've ever told him the story. I was like part-time on both. I was part-time on the lending company because he couldn't afford to have me full-time, and I was still part-time. I found another partner to build the gym company, and it was just like the crazy, I'm an entrepreneur. I could live anywhere, and I literally lived in an apartment with 2 other guys. One was one of my business partners. The other guy was a good buddy of mine. He was doing investment banking at JPM, and we had this 2.5 bed loft, 1 bathroom, maybe 800 square foot apartment, on top of each other. And then we had this New York office that we exchanged it was right on Wall Street. We exchanged shares in Endurance Lane Network, the lending business, to the landlord to give us free office space because we could. So then he had this dead trading floor. So we'd go up to this trading floor and we'd sit in there and we'd be hacking away, 3 of us working on the gyms, having a bunch of interns working on the lending company. And then on the weekends, I would Airbnb out my room and I would take the Chinatown bus to DC because that was the cheapest. And then I would bartend at my buddy's nightclub.
No way.
Stay at my parents'.
Wow.
For 2 nights, and I'd be able to make $400 cash, come back up, take the profits. And we were of my Airbnb after I paid out the fees, and I had someone manage it for me, and also I changed sheets and I gave them keys, and then I would split it up 3 ways for my roommates so they wouldn't be mad that I was doing that. I could never do that now. So I was doing that, and then it was year, ended up getting bed bugs because so many people were cycling through that. I was I'm moving to San Francisco with my partners. And so I moved out there and I've been in California ever since, man.
What happened with the gyms?
We sold them all.
You sold them all? And then what about the banking business?
Oh, so the lending business, that was probably what, really helped my career is just the learning opportunity. So with the lending business, we raised our seed round, and then we were raising a Series A. And then what happened was there was a company in London that was probably 3 years ahead of us. They were raising a round at the same time, actually. And so they came in as part of the round, acquired us. They were called Funding Circle. And so we got the benefit of being acquired early, having capital to run with in the United States. They were in London, and, being able to scale a tech business really quickly. There's pluses and minuses to that. I saw a lot of corporate waste. I saw a lot of amazing executives. I saw a really bunch of passionate people that were mission driven. And ultimately the business was great, and it went public on the LSE, and it's still public, and it's a great asset. But, that experience for me to be able to be at a couple people in a room to then, taking it public. And then that's what led to me starting the PLL was an amazing opportunity and I was running sales in the US, and it was great.
Wait, did I hear you say you took it public?
I wasn't the person. I wasn't the founder
but
of
you
it.
were
I was
part
on the
of
founding team.
it.
Yeah.
Because you guys got acquired, so you stayed on.
So I stayed on, and we were
contract.
10 people. I think it was 8 full-time people, maybe 3 interns, and they acquired us. And then when I left, we were 300 people in the US and doing, $50 million in revenue in the US.
Wow.
But
how long did you, how long before?
5 years after they acquired us.
Got it. That's cool.
Yeah, it was great.
Really cool.
So then I was kind of, as it was IPOing, I was all right, what else am I going to go do? And not that was I got to leave, but it was just kind of, what else is there for me to do here type of deal.
You're kind of ready for the next season, the next chapter.
Yeah, and I was just also I have the most risk appetite left before I get to that series of my life where I want to, build some roots and build legacy and have a family. And so I was all right, I got a window of 5 years. What's the most ambitious swing I can possibly take?
And how old were you at that time where you're I have 5 years?
I was 33, 34.
33, 34.
Yeah.
You're okay, I'm gonna take a huge swing on this next
So I read this book called Pivot by Jenny Blake. It's a great book. And it was really what she does. She was an early employee at Google, and then she went out and started her own executive coaching business. But she basically was like, build your value set of what you want to do in your life, and then try to triangulate from those values, like what type of industry. So it's kind of like similar to a book like What Color Is Your Parachute, but like more prescriptive for people that have like already worked a little bit. And a lot of the values I started outlining were around working with people I care about and can learn from, having equity upside in something, and trying to disrupt an industry. And so
those are
a
the
big
three
swing.
values
Yeah,
that you kind of like in your mind what you want.
there was
for that
other
next
like
thing.
smaller ones, but those are the big ones. And not to use a cliche word like disrupt, but like basically do something really ambitious. And so so I looked at, okay, who do I really care about the most? My family, my brother. So obviously co-founder, so attacked it with that mentality and equity. We have equity in this business, and looking at something big like trying to build a sports league, right? And so those, like, after using that framework to look at a bunch of different things, that was the thing that was clearest based on those values that I built after reading that book.
How the company goes public, and how soon did you come up with this idea with your brother of starting this company? Like, how much time was
it was
there
it was sort of happening at the same time.
what simultaneously?
Yeah.
And when did you read this book? Right around that time?
It was the summer of 2015.
And is that because I think this was created in 2018?
Sorry, 2016.
Was
this was started in
PLL
2018? Yeah.
So you read that book. So
I
you
think it took us like 2 years to launch, right?
Yeah.
We were like stealth for a while. I'm trying to think about, so we were like, I was reading the book in the summer. I went down to Mexico with my now wife, girlfriend. I was reading this book and taking notes. Maybe it was the late spring. I can't remember. Everything starts melding together. But it was like 2015, 2016 timeframe, 2017, end of 2016, 2017. 2017 was our stealth year. No one knew about us, but we raised capital silently. And then it was just like proof point. It was like, that wasn't enough capital for us to start a league. It was enough capital to get proof points to then raise another round to get the league launched.
Who wanted to do this first? You or Paul?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
So you were like, hey, Paul, I got an idea.
Yeah, and he was like, dude, that's crazy. I have
Because
endorsements.
there was already a professional
There was
lacrosse
a league.
league.
He was playing in it.
It was major.
He was MVP at Major League Lacrosse.
Yeah.
And we ended up merging with them, 4 years later. But from that first meeting, so we originally went out and tried to buy them or merge with them or have them bring me and Paul in and get equity in it. And it just didn't make sense for them at the time.
What an ambitious
Yeah, I couldn't do it now. People are like, "Would you do it again?" I'm like, "No." There's
you
not
take
a shot.
you're part of a company that goes public, and you're like, "Okay, what's my next season? What's my next chapter in life?" And you're like, "All right, I'm gonna swing big." And it's like, I'm gonna start.
The thing about when companies go public,
league.
right? There's lockup periods, right, for employees usually. And the way this thing worked was there was like a lockup, but it was not an official lockup. You just had to like transfer these rights in the UK, and it took like 4 months, and so stock got hit pretty hard, and so I didn't really receive a ton of value. So when people say companies went public, it is still public. It just wasn't a huge event for me where I could retire. So I got to go make PLL work. I still do.
Yeah.
I still got to make PLL work. And so I was ambitious because I am ambitious. And I think that, there's something to be said for backing founders who have never had that liquidity event yet, because they can't just be like, it doesn't work, I'm good. Like, they got to make it work.
Yeah. The other thing is crazy that your shares get locked up for 6 months to a year.
Yeah. That's how it goes, man.
That's just how it goes.
Well, they don't want a mass exodus of
true.
employees, right? And I get it.
I get it too. Because I just can't.
I still have I'm still a big shareholder in Funding Circle. I believe in their business. Someone should buy that thing. It's cash flowing, and it creates great loans, and it's big in Europe. And anyway, no one's gone this deep with me on Funding Circle before. It's great.
Yeah, that's true. People would probably want to talk
They're
about.
Just like, tell me about the PLL.
Yeah. Well, I think.
A lot of what I learned at Funding Circle, the values I applied in working in tech, working in Silicon Valley, I've applied to this league.
That's your foundation. That's kind of like, I think about like when you look at the man or you look at the company, it's like a lot of that has to do with like your journey leading up to this point.
Yeah,
it's totally. Like, I think about my own journey in life. It's like we can talk about the brokerage deals that I'm doing right now or like the business that I'm doing, but it's like if you really want to dive deep in getting to know kind of my psyche, you kind of got to go back. Like really understand like what I was going through and where I came.
If you really want to go back,
really
want to psychoanalyze
you,
what do they say? That if you want to understand the story of if you want to understand the son, learn the story of the father. Probably if you really go down and understand your dad.
Yeah.
Right. And then a lot of the stuff that you're doing,
totally,
how you interact, why you're so, ambitious, why you're so aggressive, why you network so hard, why you fight for your clients. Probably a lot of it's tied to your dad.
100%. Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, there's so much that I learned from my dad, but he owns an office furniture dealership. So I grew up like installing furniture like we have here. And a lot of his friends that were super successful were brokers. And so I had this like vision of like, I wanted to kind of vertically integrate the business of furniture and brokerage. And so a lot of like the vision that I have has to do with incorporating, because it's so bifurcated, as in it's so
totally separate.
It's totally separate. And it's like, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so there's also kind of like going into like, if your parents are amazing teachers for the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that I learned from dad that was unbelievable when it comes to like pushing me and hard work and like what I learned from him. But there's also some things I'm like, I don't really want to replicate that. I want to be something different. So you're absolutely right. I've never heard anyone say that, but that couldn't be more true. If you want to understand the man, understand the dad.
The story of the father. Yeah.
But I also think too, like diving a bit deeper, like so a lot of who I am has to do with my mom too.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's not just my dad. The dad has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
But also mom.
It's both.
Too. It's both.
100%.
Yeah, it's both.
And that's not my quote, by the way. That's a quote of the founder of Four Seasons. I think he said that.
Do you think? What about you? What? Tell me about your dad.
My dad works at the PLL. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
He was 35 years of selling paper as a paper salesperson, and my mom still is a Catholic school art teacher. And so I think it's a story of both of them. For sure, I think our work ethic comes from our father, and our creativity and ability to deal make, I'd say, and really collaborate comes from our mom. So I think you're right. It should be the quote should be reframed. Understand the story of her parents.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt, right, that a lot of the values, and being a new dad, right? I literally think about that every day when I'm with my son.
I saw a picture of your son. He's got your eyes.
He's got like the most he has hair, eyes. which is a win. But one of the things I think about is like not talking about hair too much, because I don't have it. And it was like really hard for me. My dad still has great hair. And like I started losing this is like insanely deep, but I started losing my hair when I was like 18, 19. It was like devastating. And I think about, at some point I'll talk to my son about, you might lose your hair because your dad doesn't have his hair. And let me tell you why that's okay. And working through that with him, like early before it happens, just so there's like a framework there. And so anyway, there will be bad habits that I will impart, no doubt. Which we can't help. But at the same time, like being aware enough to know like exactly what you said around, there will be good and bad they pick up. Hopefully it's more good.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And like, I am so grateful to have, I mean, I'm sure you are too, but like the good and the bad, I'm very grateful. Like I appreciate it all, because you talk to people that are successful, and a lot of times like people that dealt with the people that are kind of the people we interview on this podcast, and the people that I like, a lot of the books that I read, it's actually a blessing to deal with adversity early on in life, because I think so much of being succcy has a lot to do with grit and being able to like overcome the adversity. And so there was things in my life early on, which you brought up, like, why am I the way that I am? It had a lot to do with that early on adversity.
Totally, man.
And so like, I wouldn't change it. Like, but it's also funny because I don't necessarily know if I'd want that for my son, but I'm grateful that I had it, if that makes sense.
100% it makes sense.
Yeah, I hope they have their own adversity, but I'm like, I don't know if I'd want you to go through what I went through, because that was really painful to a certain degree, But
on the other side of it, you're, well sort of manicured from that experience, right?
The other thing that's so interesting is it's so much of life is perspective, right? Because you think about the parent or the child that has a parent that's an alcoholic, and they become an alcoholic, or the child goes the opposite direction and goes, hey, I'm not drinking alcohol because my parent was an alcoholic, right? Like you can kind of blame mom and dad for the way that you are, but in both directions. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Of course. I think that the percentage, what gets interesting to me is like when faced with traumatic experiences in your neighborhood, what percentage of people come out for the positive versus which people sort of get stuck in those, in the same situations.
Yeah, as kind of generation above them.
Yeah. Like who makes it out for the better versus like what percentage doesn't. I mean, that to me is the data that is interesting, we would need a sociologist in here to help us with.
Yeah, I actually was Mason, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I was talking to someone about this actually before I met with you. Funny enough, he studied philosophy and political science, and we somehow got into socialistic societies and capitalism. And he was talking about how he's from actually Nicaragua, and he's like, he loves America because it's being in a capitalistic society is that person, you have the ability to kind of, what he was explaining to me, which is so true, is like in a lot of different countries, or when you deal with socialism, you don't have the ability to get out of your class.
Right.
Whereas in capitalism, you can be kind of low on the pecking order, the pecking order, and you can work your way up like he did. And he's like the CFO of some like really big company in El Segundo. And he was telling me all about that, of how for him and his family, capitalism is the best thing that ever happened to him.
There's more upside opportunity.
Yeah,
versus
there's way
socialism.
more.
There's not as much upside. There's not as much downside risk because everyone gets like the same equal amount of resources and treatment.
Yeah, which
Hopefully.
you brought something up of like, hey, I grew up in Maryland. It's so funny we're going down this route, but it's interesting. You were like, I grew up in Maryland, and you kind of were expressing your experience in high school. I grew up in Westlake Village, California, and I went to Oaks Christian, which is like a really nice school, and I'm so fortunate to have gone there. But I was around kind of like a lot of money early on, which I would put myself in the category of not having a lot of money. So that had a lot to do with why I am the way I am, is because I was surrounded by so much wealth, and I'm like, I don't have this.
So do you feel like you're chasing that because you were surrounded by it?
I think a big part of it, of like just kind of being the kid who didn't have what everyone else had. I was very much in a completely different financial situation than a lot of the people around me. And so it created a little bit of a, the first thing that comes,
syndrome,
maybe, but like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder.
Like I can do this too on my own.
Like I'm gonna like, cause it's people
Prove I
write you
belong.
off. Yeah. Like people like, I think for me, what I've also noticed recently is like, the best thing you could ever say to me, which I know for a fact, I think you're like this, and I'm pretty sure you are, is tell me I can't do it. There's a part of me that's like that had to have got instilled early on in life, being in that type of environment.
Yeah. You didn't have it. I talk about that a lot internally. I mean, I'm telling a lot of things I don't normally talk about. I mean, I think about.
I've never talked about any of this stuff on the podcast.
Good.
This is really good. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I think a lot about is, especially like when you get to a place in pro sports, the reason why pro sports are valuable is that one, it's live, right? It's live consumption. It's one of the last few appointment viewing assets where like you have to sit down for it or it's over. And because it's like that, people are more tolerant to advertising. So they'll sit through commercials, whereas like people will just pay a premium now not to have commercials. So that's what makes sports valuable. That's why like advertising and sponsorships are still really valuable, right? People will watch, right? Where advertisers aren't just programmatically buying, and they know people are paying attention. And then, the other thing is like they're expensive. And so you're starting to see, they're like one of one assets. It's really hard to build. We've for better or worse, had to raise real money to operate this thing. But that builds a moat. That means it's like hard for competition to come in necessarily. Also, at the same time, when you raise lots of money, you start spending time, like you're saying, from your high school, with people who have a considerable amount of wealth, and then you're like so close to it. You start thinking like, am I like so close to it? But you're actually really far from it. But you're like getting invited to a dinner, or maybe they're like, bringing you on their plane to get somewhere fast. And I'm like super appreciative of all those things, but it's also like not my life. Mm-hmm. And so when you get close to them, it either can create like ambition or resentment. And I'm glad that you have the ambition piece of it. I think I do too, but it's confusing.
It can be confusing. And I also find that like I'm not really the type of person who, when I see someone else successful, I get really jealous. It creates like a new pathway in my brain of like, oh, that's super cool that they're doing that. That almost inspires me to like work harder. And that's like, if they're capable of doing that, like that pushes me to like, that changes my mind on what I think is capable, what I think I'm capable of.
100%.
Does that like,
Of course. A lot of people are trying to achieve that mindset of appreciation, and we're in the same circle, and I'm excited for my friends that become successful in terms of at least monetary assets. I've tried to mold my brain that way early, where like a lot of buddies from Dartmouth who have been really successful, and hopefully monetarily, and hopefully that success allows you and allows them, because of that monetary success, to open up opportunities for you, right? Like your buddies who do well, your friends, all of a sudden they can be a client of yours, or,
Definitely.
My friends, same thing, right? They can sponsor an asset. I can invest in their next deal. They can introduce me to an investor. They can introduce me to someone who's doing something really interesting. So I think about it as like an expanded network. But I also think about, friends of mine who are like really happy in their family, and like doing and staying in their lane. I've had friends of mine who are like really dedicated, like to being great family people, great husbands, men of faith. And like, I grew up super Catholic, kind of moved away from it. And some of my buddies have gotten closer to it. And it's like, when you have kids, all of a sudden you're like, maybe I should start praying again. And I'm like, not as an insurance policy, but kind of an insurance policy. Like, and getting closer to God and your faith again. And so like this like sort of peacefulness that they have, around family and their faith, and focus on their career. And that also is success. It's not just how the assets you can have and, the accumulation, because when you're, the studies are empirical that, people on their deathbed, they wish they just had more time with the people they care about, family and friends. It's not like, damn, I wish I bought that Lamborghini.
Yeah.
I wish I got that vacation house in St. Inez. Like, that's not what they're wishing. They're wishing they had a better relationship with people. They're wishing they spent more time, more experiences. So it's not to say I'm not going to be ambitious and go hunt and keep focused on this thing, but I also know that life is like bigger and more meaningful.
Yeah, that's so cool. What would you say, Michael? How would you define success?
Internal peace with yourself, authenticity, true authenticity of like waking up every day and being happy with who you are and your family and your situation, being comfortable to provide the type of, safety that you want for the people you care about, the type of experiences that may enrich you and broaden your life. So whatever that means, I know it's super broad, but like if you like to travel, being able to provide travel, because that opens up a whole new world. I didn't travel growing up, but I think about how can I travel with my family to show them that this isn't our little bubble here. This isn't reality. This is not the world. Mm-hmm. If you want to be at a place where like education is really important, and paying for like amazing education, being able to afford that and put your family through that, or experience more time with your parents. Like, our time with our parents is only getting smaller.
Yeah.
The bulk of my time in person with my parents is so much smaller than it used to be. So how do I get around, who still live in Maryland, still live in the house we grew up in? How do I spend more time with them? So to me, I think about like internal peace, authenticity, and like flexibility to live my value sets is like success.
Yeah, that's such a cool definition of success. Going back to your family, something I heard recently that kind of gave me a lot of perspective is like life is about perspective, but someone was like, hey, think about how much more time you have with your family, like how many more years you have left. Like I'm gonna talk about my parents for a second. I'm talking about my mom. My mom just turned 60, so realistically she probably has another, call it 20 years, 25 years. I mean, hopefully she gets to 100, but let's just say 20.
Sure.
That's only 20 more Christmases I have. So when you break it down to experiences, right? It's like 20 more Thanksgivings. You all of a sudden start to realize, you're like, wow, like this it's limited. It's
an article written by Carl Richards. His I think his website's Wait But Why, but he breaks down this math, right? Where he's like, you start doing the math on how much time you have left with your family, And that starts to become more important. So
Yeah.
it's, do exactly the math you just did.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start reprioritizing that, be like, how
Totally.
do I get actually more? It's
Yeah.
not just the holidays. It's the vacations we need to
Yes.
set. It's
Yes.
the, random weekends that I'm flying you out there, or I'm going to go see you, or the
Yes.
dinners we're going to have every Sunday. If you can afford to do that, those things start to matter when you actually start to get quantitative about time.
And you start reprioritizing.
Exactly.
Right? Like once I started doing this, I was like, okay, I'm going to do these things that I normally do with them, right? Like the holidays, but then I'm going to go out of my way to put together a trip where I can invite my parents or invite my siblings to make sure that we're spending quality time together.
100%.
Yeah. I also think too, I don't know if you know this, but faith is actually a really big part of my life.
Yeah, you told me that.
And
yeah, that's great.
I think what it does is it helps me, because I have to catch myself of like sometimes I could kind of lean in and prioritize things that maybe shouldn't be prioritized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's being ambitious and wanting to be successful, you sometimes can lean into things that at the end of the day, like they really don't, they matter, but like there's things that are probably, they matter more.
Sure.
And what I found is like faith for me is a great thing to have in my life, because it kind of helps me manage and kind of helps me know what my true north is, right? Like, so if I get a little off the path, right? If I'm kind of heading in the wrong direction, it's like, okay, no, I gotta get back going to my true north. And that's just always helped me in life.
Totally, man.
And the whole thing is focusing on relationships, right? Like if you think about faith itself, and it's all about like treating people right and focusing on relationships.
Totally. It's a value set. It's important to you. It's cool that it grounds you.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
It's very, very important to find that grounding mechanism.
Yeah. I also find I'm off when it isn't a big part of my life. Like I'm different, like when I think about how do I rejuvenate every week, it's getting in, it's funny. It's like Sundays, getting into nature, doing some type of hike, trail run, getting outside, getting into community somehow and trying to do church. Totally. And I just think about like, I don't have a son or kids yet, hopefully soon. It's like, what types of values do I want to instill in them?
Totally. Yeah. That's great, man. It's good. Getting out. People always like, you'll see stuff on like Instagram where people post like, a picture of like eating fried chicken on Sunday and they'll be like church. And you're like, I know, right? But like, or like someone posts like yoga, which is getting closer, right?
Yeah.
It's like Buddhist practices of some sort of religion. But I think everyone needs to be grounded. Everyone needs to be centered. And then, there's this like cool philosophy that you're talking about is like getting out in nature. It's he's a professor at Harvard. His name is Arthur Brooks, talks about getting small. And whether that's getting into nature is like the easiest hack, or like traveling, but like getting outside yourself is what he says. And I find the same thing. That's why I love living in the Bay, because like there's amazing access to hiking, like some of the best mountains. And
where you live now is pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But
like
go
to the ocean and beach.
Talking about like Point Reyes, and you can get like cliffs and like forest
it's
at the
amazing.
same time. It's just crazy. And the ocean's right there. And anyway, like getting small gives you perspective that you're just like a little bit less important than you think you are.
Totally.
Which is the truth.
Which by the way, when I get out of the city, I realize that.
Yeah.
Because you look up at in the city, you can't really see the stars.
Yeah.
And when you get outside of the city, you look up and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
The world is like, the universe is so big.
Yeah, it's so big. And there's that concept of time is, we're just like, I think there's like a 10,000 year clock somewhere in Texas, the 10,000 year clock that I was just listening to the Lex Friedman podcast with Jeff Bezos. We're talking about this clock in Texas that only ticks once a year. But if you like put your life in context of the 10,000 year clock, it's such a small amount that also like the point of it is to like reframe and like make all your time really worth it. You just, start to think about that a lot more. When you have a family, or you hit certain age marks, or you have certain moments in your life. I was talking to someone today in our one-on-one. I was like, in my 20s and early 30s, all I thought about was like, oh, let me just hit this next, moment, or let my bank account look like this, or get this next, notch on my LinkedIn resume. And, you get those moments, or maybe you do or don't achieve something, but then you turn around and you're like, my core values that I talked about earlier are still really important. Working with people I care about and can learn from, having upside opportunity to build something. Those things still resonate today, and they become more important as you get older, right? Because you get all the skills. Like early part of your career is just about skill accumulation and learning like what you do and don't want to do, and matching it with like your interests, and getting just as much experience as you can to then like when you get in your like mid 30s to like 50, you're just running. Those are your prime earning years, right? Or mid-50s, mid-30s, mid-50s. Those are your prime earning years. So if you think about your early 20s to like mid-30s, many skills, as many different things. That's why I did all this different stuff. I was just like living out of just like as much as I can learn. That's like everything that I've applied here is just like different stops I've had.
Yeah.
And then you can start to like learn it along the way. You don't need to go to business school. Nothing against those that have. We have plenty of MBAs here, but you can learn a lot from getting an MBA on the street by starting stuff or going and working at startups.
Totally. Which actually leads me to one of the quotes I saw you had that I absolutely loved. It was, people build businesses, not Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? I love that.
I said that, and I love that quote because I think a lot of people try to manage to a number, and it's important, right? Especially if you take on capital to try to achieve certain financial returns and benchmarks that you promise. But if you try to build a business around an IRR threshold or like an MOM, it's just very hard to find that type of outcome. Whereas like that, like, of course, those constructs and the business opportunity has to make sense, but it's like actually really simple. It's like, does this business opportunity have the values that I want? Do I think I can, it either has a large market opportunity or it has the ability to build a large market opportunity. I actually think like doing TAM and like trying to carve pockets of TAM is like sometimes lazy. Like I think you can actually go and like build TAM, right? Like no one thought that Facebook had like massive TAM or social media, and they just built an industry, right? So to Google, so like you can actually like build TAM if there's like an audience and you're building something of value.
What is TAM? Sorry for my
Total
ignorance.
addressable market.
Okay, got it.
So like, if you and I wanted to go build a lacrosse helmet company, we would be like, how many lacrosse players are there? How many youth players? Like, what is the price point? How many people are buying new helmets every single year? And then it's like, okay, that's a $100 million a year market. We think we can go take by building this new thing, 50 million of it. Let's go build that. Whereas like, if I was like talking to an entrepreneur who's like, or one of our equipment partners, like Q Collar, they build this thing that helps prevent concussions and around your neck. And it's like that, they're just creating a whole new industry, but they're like, this can apply to all youth sports that have contact.
Yeah.
It started with special operations folks that were wearing these things. Anyway, I think that was a deep tangent. It's what happens after drinking a coffee before this. I think that people and managing towards finding the right people at each stage of your business as you're building it will help you find the right financial outcome.
Yeah.
And so I managed to trying to find the best people, not trying to achieve a certain IRR on an Excel spreadsheet.
Well, that goes back to a quote that kind of cliche, but we've heard that culture eats strategy or whatever that quote is. Yeah, for breakfast.
Stanford Business School.
Out of curiosity, how do you hire here? How do you take on partners? Like, what do you look for?
We're really maniacal. I think about hiring. One of the things that we did it depends on the stage of business, right? You are at. And so like really early stage, even, I call it like 1 through 50, you can do it all internally because those hires are so important. So, we have, we develop a scorecard, and we try to be quantitative about it because if you're too qualitative, then that creates like hiring bias, right? There's two categories of the scorecard. It's volatile traits at the PLL, right? So, things like creativity, frugality, horsepower, work ethic, helpfulness are like things that we screen for in the interview process. And then you have role specific traits. So if you're hiring for, an email marketer or, a head of operations, those are different roles, right? Each requires specific things to that role. You need to check off, right? Or what the company needs. So that's like, 1 through 50. You still have those scorecards, like 50 through 100, but sometimes you need help because like those people that are interviewing internally have like other things they need to do to achieve. So we've worked with a really good recruiter. I'll give them a shout, Aux Talent, that, focuses a lot on sports and we've negotiated a really great deal with them, where it's contingency based, where unless we hire someone, it's kind of like doing a brokerage deal, right? And if they feed us candidates, they pre-screen for us, they set up the talent on a schedule basis, and then we are able to bring the candidate in. If we select one of their candidates, they stay for 30 days. We pay them a percentage of that person's first year salary, and we don't pay them first; we pay them upon success. And so, that has been a way for us to still use that policy of scorecard measuring, But then a lot of the administrative work that soaks up a lot of time around hiring, we outsource that now because it's more important that our people are focused on hitting their OKRs. Still are interviewing, still making sure we're getting the best people and have the final say. But the administrative work we outsource.
And really cool. And you just mentioned something. You use OKRs.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the. Do you mind sharing a little
Sure.
bit of OKRs?
It's a Google framework. They created the framework. There's different systems of how companies run. KPIs is another one. OKRs is objectives and key results, and we set company level OKRs.
How long have you guys been running OKRs?
Since the beginning.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Since the beginning. Yeah. First year. And there's department level OKRs, and there's annual and quarterly, and we have weekly meetings about our OKR progress, and then our company is gold off of their annual OKRs and achievement of those, right? And so your quarterly is supposed to ladder up to those, and you can be malleable based on what's happening in the business. But for us, like some measurement system and being really quantitative and focused, deriving down from what the company objectives are, allows us to really be prescriptive about what the day-to-day focus should be for folks. And that can change quarterly, it can change annually. Again, based on, where the company's going, what's happening in the marketplace. But we've been really rigorous around following that process. And it's worked for us. It's hard, but what we always say is that our OKRs are our stars, and that's like you said, our North Star. And that's where everyone's sort of focused on right now, is achieving those things.
It's cool. I love OKRs. I use them. I'm not using them necessarily right now, but I've used them at points in my career, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
That I could totally see. I mean, that's cool that you implemented that from year one. Did you read the book? Is that how you came across them?
No, it's a credit to our head of finance. I had used the KPI system, and he was all about OKRs, and so I trusted him and follow it. And he actually drives it forward with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Leads it for us.
Well, you've mentioned a lot of books that you've read. Is there any books you might recommend? Books you really liked?
Depends on what you want to achieve. I think there's I've spent a lot of time in self-help. I'm doing more biographies these days.
I spend a lot of time in you call it self-help. I like to say self-development because
there you go.
I'm developing myself.
Better branding. Man, I read and I've heard more and more people say this, which is good news. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
Amazing. About his experience in Auschwitz.
Perseverance. Yeah.
Auschwitz?
Yeah. That was an amazing book. The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
One of my, a good friend of mine, actually, I can't remember if I connected you with him, Tony Knopp. He runs Spotlight Ticket Manager. Did I ever connect you with him?
I think you did, yeah. It sounds familiar.
Anyways, that's one of his favorite books.
It's amazing. I mean, he's just super candid about building the company, and a lot of great takeaways. I'm reading a Cable Cowboy about John Malone and him building TCI, which is crazy book right now. I've sort of navigated more from. I mean, I mentioned career development books.
You mentioned Pivot.
Yeah,
that was kind of life changing for you, and then you mentioned another book that I've heard people talk about. Something about parachutes.
Oh, What Color is Your Parachute?
Yeah,
that book's that's dude, I tried to build a fintech, I tried to build an ed tech company around that. It's basically, if you don't know what you want to do in your career, and you're coming out of some sort of GED or college program, and you're like, I don't know what to do. That book basically takes you through a survey, and then you match your answers to different. It matches your answers to different career categories. So if you're like, I hate sitting in an office, I want to be using my hands, I want to build things, and I want to do something that's recession proof, it'll be there's construction, and there's HVAC, manufacturing, and it'll put you in certain categories, right? So that book to me, it's probably a book at this point. It's 40, 50 years old, but I think they've revamped it a few times, but that to me is a really good guidepost for folks that have no clue what they want to do. And you can revisit it kind of anytime. So it's kind of a classic, Yeah.
Super cool. I've heard multiple people talk about how good that book is,
Really?
helping point them in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's funny, going back to faith being a part of my life. I think I was in church years ago, and the pastor was like recommending that book to everyone to read. I didn't end up reading it, but him, and then like 3 or 4 other people in my life have mentioned how good that book is.
Really?
Yeah.
Have a lot of people been mentioning, my brother just sent it to me, the Rick Rubin book. Is anyone been talking about that book?
What's it called?
Oh man, I don't know. It's all about like
Look it up, Mason.
the creative process of how he's a music producer.
Oh, didn't 60 Minutes do like an episode on him?
Yeah, he did a big tour on his book. Creative Act, yeah.
No, I don't know it.
That's supposed to be a great book. Paul just sent it to me for my birthday, and I have it sitting on my
Did you have a
desk.
birthday recently?
Yeah.
Happy belated. When was the
Thanks,
birthday?
man. Jan 7th.
Jan 7th. I'm reading Schwarzenegger's new book.
Cool.
I think it's called Be Useful.
Yeah.
Which I actually like really like. I really like the book.
There you go. That's what the book's about. Be useful in life. I don't have any preconceived notion around I think that if you listen to a book, you should be able to say that you read the book. Like technically you didn't read it, you listened to it, but you absorbed the content of the book.
Oh, that's a big one. There are people that feel differently on that. I've had a few discussions where it's like, if you listen to a book, can you say you read it? And it's like, well, you consume the content.
Well, why does it matter? I think a problem with reading is like, reading is one form of consumption of the content. And I think if like most authors, if they don't care how you consume their content, they just want you to understand their content.
Yeah.
Right. So the medium of audio is like a hack to people who, want to make convenience of their time, who maybe reading for them is harder because of the way that their auditory processing, or sorry, just their processing in general. And so, you can get through books faster. If you can speed up the narration, where like sometimes like reading pace is different. For me, I have to read sometimes like a page like 2 or 3 times to absorb the content.
Same.
When I'm listening to it auditorily, I can process it faster. So I don't think it matters. I actually think that audio is like one of the biggest hacks of the last decade.
I agree.
I was just talking to this young student at Dartmouth, and she plays on the women's lacrosse team, and she's trying to figure it out. And so I did a call with her because one of my friends asked me to, and she was really bright, but like really like sort of early in her development, doesn't really raw, hasn't had an internship yet. And I was like, listen, the biggest hack I can give you is start listening to podcasts.
Yes.
And listening to books in your free time. And there's just more content available to you through audio than there's ever been. It's easy to consume, and you can learn so much.
Yeah.
And so it's this huge unlock that people should be really proud of. And so that would be my answer. And I think it's like a massive hack that we can all learn from.
Yeah, I echo that, because it's like once a few years ago, I started getting on Audible, and they had like some type of thing where you could do $10 a month and you get a book a month.
Cool.
So I started listening to a book a month, and now I've just kept that up of listening to a book a month. Yeah. And then on top of that, I listen to podcasts. If I'm not working and I'm not like needing to be like hands-on with what I'm doing, whenever I'm in transition, I'm in the car, or I'm working out, or I'm going for a walk, it's like I'm listening to a podcast, which is so funny because I think about how much more I know today given all of the content I've consumed.
There's so much information available. By the way, it's easier to get it.
There's so much information available, but you have to make an active choice of the type of content you're going to consume, because there's so much of it that's garbage, and there's a lot of gold out there. Totally. And you have to be very, very conscious of what you're consuming.
So you should ask people, because everyone asks what's your favorite book.
Yeah.
And you could also ask what your favorite podcast
Well,
is.
I was going to get to that.
Oh, so you do that already. Good.
I definitely do that, which hopefully you say Awesome Office after this. Yeah.
Is out number one.
The reason I brought up the book for you is because you referenced books throughout the podcast a few different times. Yeah. So it was like very clear to me. I'm like, oh, wow. Usually most people that are leaders and successful read a lot. So that's why I brought that up. But for you, what podcasts do you consume? I consume a lot.
I think invest with the best. Patrick O'Shaughnessy is like such a great interviewer, and so he's great, and he has amazing guests on there. Founders is amazing. I think his name is David. I'm going to botch his last name, so I won't try. But he basically does like cliff notes on biographies and autobiographies of amazing founders.
Oh, that's cool.
So that one's really good. Obviously, Scott Galloway's stuff. Prof G is amazing.
I like I listen to his markets every Monday.
Yeah, Prof G is an amazing podcast.
Office Hours is pretty cool too.
Yeah, was that the old?
He's entertaining. He's just like Prof G, I think his name is Scott Galloway.
Scott Galloway, yeah.
He's entertaining.
He has another one called Office, or one of the Prof G.
Yeah, so he does like basically 3. He does markets that drops on Monday.
Oh yeah,
and I believe he does it on Sunday.
Yeah.
And then he does Office Hours in the middle of the week, and then he does like an interview with someone.
Yeah, the last.
And
one.
then he's got his like a 15-minute little clip where it's like some article that he wrote that someone else reads.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like him.
There's
I like him a lot too.
You can rip through like New York Times.
Have you heard of the Joe Rogan podcast?
I actually like Joe Rogan's stuff. Same.
And
I appreciate, the thing about Joe Rogan is like he has so much range.
Yeah.
He can like cover anything. It's amazing. He'll sit down with like Jack Dorsey and do like a 2.5-hour podcast, and then you'll have like an MMA guy and go like 3 hours with them, and that range is like really rare.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone's into Andrew Huberman these days. I think some of his stuff is good. A lot of like Peter Attia is decent as well.
I've never heard of his podcast. I've never listened
Peter
to it.
Attia?
Yeah, I didn't even know he had a podcast, but I assume it's great.
I still tap into Tim Ferriss. I think his stuff is amazing. He has a podcast with Arthur Brooks on the pursuit of happiness. He's the happiness professor at Harvard. I talked about probably one of the best podcasts I've listened to in a year.
It was that episode?
That episode.
Tim Ferriss with
Arthur Brooks, professor at Stanford or at Harvard.
I bet he went into quite a bit about relationships.
Totally. Talked about his relationship with his wife, with his parents, his relationship with the Catholic Church. He converted to Catholicism for his wife. Talks about, his family, just like how to like wireframe around money. Like that principle of getting small. I talked about it's from him. I was, my wife and I listened to it, and she was like, I was driving, and she was just like taking notes, and I revisit those notes all the time.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. You know what book I read recently that I absolutely love? The Psychology of Money.
Oh,
it's about this guy who was in finance. He worked in Wall Street, hated it, his life, basically quit his job, started a financial blog. Was writing a financial blog. It became one of the most read financial blogs like in the world. And then in 2020, November 2020, he dropped this book, The Psychology of Money.
Nice.
And I've read it now 2 or 3 times. It's amazing. Kind of like his recommendations on how to invest, along with like history of money, the history of the stock market, why people make the decisions that they make. It's an amazing book.
Right.
And I think it's for anyone that's younger out there or like trying to wrap their mind on great habits when it comes to money. I can't recommend it enough.
Great.
Yeah. Incredible book. Psychology of Money.
I'm going to listen to it.
Yeah. It's really, really good. It's one of these concepts that I loved is he talks about this idea. Don't want to botch it. One of his chapters is reasonable versus rational. Okay. So like he breaks it down. It's perfectly like rational to say, okay, interest rates are 3% and I'm going to get a loan and I'm going to pull money out with my loan, like refinance my house. I'm going to take that money and put it into the stock market because I can make like 8-9%. So I'm going to kind of play that like margin or whatever.
Sure.
He's like, that's perfectly rational. And if you're a finance person, you get it. Like you can absolutely go do that. But he's like, I don't try to be rational anymore. I try to be reasonable in my life, and not having a mortgage on your house and owning your house free and clear is completely reasonable. And so I always like thought like, debt can be very good, but like I've always been like I kind of want to own my house outright. Like I don't really want any like debt. Yeah, I want to be debt free to a certain degree in like life. And so he like basically talks about those types of concepts of like rational versus reasonable. That's like one chapter. Yeah, it's super good.
Yeah. That's a whole long debate where people are often irrational about their mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. Where they're like, oh, this thing is sitting over my head. I have debt, but they're making a wide margin on the market, but they just don't want any debt.
Yeah.
And so they rather put money in the dirt than put money in the market.
Well, it's funny because if you talk
to, and I get that. And so there's an aspect of, emotional safety there that is more important than logic.
Yeah.
And that's just up to the
It's
individual.
completely up to the person, where it's like, it's in my mind, I understand finance, I understand how it works. And it's like, yeah, I could go do that. And that's perfectly like the wise financial decisions. But also I think it's also wise if you're like, hey, I just want a roof over my head. I don't want my family to ever have to worry about a mortgage payment. We're just going to have to take care of insurance and the tax and maintenance, and we're good to go.
We're good.
It's like stuff like that. Or like, yeah, it's really good. I'd highly recommend it.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other books that I've read recently that I love.
Creativity Inc. is a really good book.
Creativity Inc. I've heard of that one.
It's about Pixar. We had our whole company read it recently. It's an amazing book. It's just about, and it's a lot of stuff that you can apply to the workforce. So if there's people who are building companies here, I think it's an amazing, tells a story of Pixar and different iterations, but like a lot of the practices that they put in place to create creative freedom. Think about what they've been able, like movie after movie after movie. Yeah. Not only is the animation technology, like, was it proprietary and amazing and Disney purchased it, but like giving writers the space to concept those hit after hit after hit is really hard. And in a business where, we have to always be like, one of our values here is encourage creativity. Like we have to encourage. So like, I was like, man, if that's one of our values, we need to create like framework around that for people so they can be more creative. And like, what better way than to look at what, Pixar's done.
Totally. Pixar's a phenomenal company.
So that's a good, like, applicable book.
I just thought of another question that we've never asked before, but this would be interesting. On social media, people you like to follow.
Damn. That one's so hard.
Right? So we talked about books, we talked about podcasts. I don't think we've ever asked anybody. It's like, who is on social media that you're like, ooh, I like following that person?
Look.
And maybe you're like,
it depends on where you are in life, right? Like for me, I like to follow brands. And I like to follow things that are more, when I'm going on social media, it's like, I know I'm turning my brain off, right? It's like, going on Netflix, it's like, I get to rest. So I go on social media, it's like, I'm not going to social media to learn. There's so many places I can learn. I can learn from my work, I can learn from my friends and family, I can learn from podcasts, learn from books. When I go to social, I'm just like, for me at least, it's like turn my brain off. So honestly, man, I follow a lot of like food creators.
Oh, that's cool.
I love watching. I mean, look at me. I like to eat, right? Unfortunately, too much.
I think I read that you're into lasagna, making lasagna.
Yeah. Make lasagna.
Are you a big cook? Are you
to cook.
Are you cooking at the house?
I cook a ton all the time. But following food creators is interesting to me. Different getting ideas, brands that are doing interesting things. I don't totally turn my brain off, but other sports leagues, what are they doing? So there is some of that, like sleuthing around and seeing what other people are doing in the space, creative ideas, creative juice. And then there's like the health and wellness folks I follow for inspiration, whether it's like workouts or, dietary plans or lifestyle hacks that they found through research. That type of stuff is like short form content from that. So I don't have to listen to 2.5 hours of Andrew Huberman. I can listen to like 30 seconds of him. And I got the podcast now.
Totally. That's kind of high end too. Because he goes deep into his podcast.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. But I also love the TikToks or the Instagrams where it's like a 2-minute. It's also, I just thought of, that's really interesting that you brought up of like following brands and following other like sports leagues. What the NFL is doing right now, I find to be so fascinating. And I'm sure you're all over this in regards to them teaming up with Peacock.
Oh, Peacock.
And basically being like, hey, we're gonna the Dolphins and the Chiefs game, we're gonna air, and what was it, $110 million that Peacock played or something?
They still got 25 million viewers.
And how much? 24?
25 million.
25 million. Yeah. Which is like basically as many as they had on I think they have like 30 million or something. And so it's like there becomes a world where like now all of a sudden like, does the Super Bowl pretty soon become like pay-per-view? Yeah. Like, does it become a thing where like you just start having like, who are they going to team up with in regards to these streaming services? And how does that affect your business moving forward? Maybe you can't really talk about it.
No, I can. It's great for our business. Look, the streaming business is sort of an unboxing of the traditional cable business, right? So there's like cable and then there's a broadcast television. So cable's like ESPN2 or CBS Sports or CW Network. And then broadcast is like, broader distributions like ABC, NBC,
Yeah.
CBS.
Yeah.
And those are like very valuable assets. But traditional cable companies, what they did, if you have a subscription to like Spectrum, or whatever it is, like you get into your cable box or Frontier, it's into your cable box, you have your cable box, and then they basically sell you different packages of like 100 channels, 150 channels, 200 channels, and you pay this price. The reality is you're only watching 5 to 6, maybe 10 channels if you watch a lot of TV, and you're paying a fee for all those different channels because the cable companies go out and they pre-negotiate with CBS Sports and CW Network and ESPN2, and then they package that and then they pass it through the customer and they take margin on it. And so all it's happening with the streaming business is they're just unpacking that and they're just delivering to you one fee, and you can kind of do a la carte. So people are like, oh, I have too many subscriptions, but it's like, what is your net payment? If you have Netflix, which is whatever, 12 or 15 bucks now, and then you have like Peacock, which is like $5, and you have ESPN Plus, which is 10.
And you have Apple, and
Maybe
Apple's
you have
doing
Apple,
stuff. Apple's doing the soccer
but then if you
stuff.
aggregate it, you're still like maybe 50, 60 bucks, whereas
Yeah.
you were paying 250 for cable, and you're getting the content that you want. And so it's just sort of like an unbundling of the bundle, and allowing the consumers to have choice. I mean, Netflix just announced today that they're streaming WWE. They
No
took Monday
way.
Night Raw, $500 million a year.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense.
So they're in the live
It's just a
sports
matter of time
business,
before
right?
they start doing more live sports.
And like I said, live sports is valuable for all the reasons I talked about, and
Which is why you wanted to be here on the West Coast. I think that's how I started my question of
Yeah.
like, hey, lacrosse is
we
East
still have a New
Coast.
York office. It's a really important office for us, and it's a lot where all the big leagues are, a lot of networks, a lot of advertisers. So, but for here, we have to build and create new fans, and so you can get like bigger and faster distribution sometimes through that.
And then lastly, I read that you guys are in the process of having. What are you guys doing with the teams?
So for the first 5 years, our teams were city agnostic. So on November 13th, we announced that we were moving our teams to home cities, home markets. So that's just a way, traditional
Do you have
sports fans.
10 now?
We have 8.
You have 8. Okay.
8, yeah.
Why did I think you had 10? I know it
Started with 6.
Got it.
We've gone to 8. We own all the teams. We own all the IP. We will go beyond 8 at some point, but right now, while we own them, we want there to be a lot of parity. We want the games to be super competitive, and we also just want to be smart with our capital. But I think like if we decide to sell teams, we will then go to more markets as their team owners will buy teams hopefully and build big fandoms deeply. But we're sort of like pre-baking those markets right now. Like and it's a way to get new fans and give them more of a reason to care. Like we did a big survey with our fans and we found that, roughly 40% in that range of 35 to 40% cared about the league more than the teams. And we're like, a lot of people would freak out, but then it's like, that's a great opportunity because that means they weren't that passionate about their team. Like people aren't like, oh, I love the NFL. They're like, I love my team.
Yeah.
Or I don't love the NBA. I love my team that's in the NBA and I follow that team. And we had all these people who are just following the league and we need them to trickle down to be more passionate about the teams. And so one traditional way is starting to move those teams in that direction. And then if we decide to sell teams to owners at some point, we'll expand beyond 8.
When do you foresee that happening?
It's the
$1 million question.
yeah, hopefully.
Because then you open it up to
multi-million-dollar
people that
question.
want to start investing in these teams.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's within the next, we'll make a decision in the next 3 to 5 years.
Cool.
Yeah. That's why I was late to this. I was working on that.
Figuring that out.
Yeah. Seriously.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Team ownership.
Yeah. We're trying to bring in really good sports operators. There's a lot of them out there, and you just got to find the right ones who are passionate about it, see the upside, and want to build.
There's so much opportunity right now. I was just reading in sports ownership.
Yeah.
When you look at the returns, I mean, you look at the deal the Dodgers just did with was it $800 million?
Yeah.
With I'm blanking on his name, that Japanese player. What? Yeah. I mean, absurd. And he gets all that at the end of his contract.
Yeah, but they're legislating that right now.
You don't think it goes through?
I might. I mean, I know that the people are like, well, listen, man, like you're playing here. You can't backload this. Like, then that sets a certain, I get it, smart. California taxes are what they are for a lot of reasons, but whether you like them or don't, like, you could argue that you're playing the same number of games and doing the same thing, and the state, he's playing and providing a service to the state in the state, and the state should have a right to that income. Or you could say, everyone could do that. Like an employee, I'm going to defer my comp, and then I want all my comp backloaded when I move to Texas or Florida. Right? Like I think it sets.
Would you consider that? Like if
No.
someone was sitting
right.
on the other side
I mean,
of the desk,
it's just, look, for everyone,
I'd tap my hat to him and be like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to do that, but I appreciate you asking me that, because
California's not that business friendly. Like, let's just be honest. But I think California tries its best to create like a level platform for everyone and opportunity. And there's amazing talent out here. And there's a great ecosystem, and that matters, right? You can just it's like the wheels are greased a bit, and so it allows you to start things faster. There's a lot of capital out here, allows you to network quicker, and those things. And the weather's amazing, and they invest in their infrastructure, I think, reasonably well, and you pay a premium for those.
Yeah.
And I get it if you don't want that stuff. And you go to a place like Miami where you have venture capitalists begging companies to come, and other venture capitalists, come here, it's amazing. It's like, why do you keep pitching it? Either it's great or it's not, and it's all good. And I get the taxes are lower, but I don't know, that's a whole nother debate. We might need to scrap all that, by the way.
yeah,
We'll see.
the Miami stuff,
We'll see, yeah.
people saying, well, because
I'm starting to dunk on people now.
As you were starting to say that, I just thought to myself, man, there's probably so many people, so many cities knocking on your door, basically being like, come, like,
Totally.
we'd love to have you.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't have to talk about that.
Certain states are more aggressive than other states, right? Yeah. I think that California isn't that aggressive with sports teams because they don't need to be, and I get it. And then there's certain states that like North Carolina or Virginia or Florida and Texas, where you can have like an interesting conversation with their economic development department about what does it mean to move a team or a league here, and what are the sort of ways that we can incentivize you to move your operation here and create economic opportunity for residents and adding value to the state. And I appreciate that.
Are you entertaining anything like that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's great.
This was honestly so fun.
Was it? Good.
Yeah, it was a blast. I mean, I enjoyed.
We went deep.
We went deep, and it was great. I hope you enjoyed being on as well.
Yeah, we'll go deeper next time if you have me back.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for being on.
Man. Thanks.
Cool.
It's great.
Thanks,
brother.
Yeah.